Record. Okay, excellent. Again, thank you all so much for being here from various countries, various states, and various grades. I'm super excited to introduce tonight Matt McKee, who is the CEO and founder of MRM Education. Super excited for him to share with you some cool nuggets on how to be successful on your college application. Matt and I have known each other for a few years now, and he's excellent. So without further ado, I'm just going to pass it over to you, Matt.
Thank you, Sadia. I so appreciate that. It's always good to be back at Lumiere doing a webinar with you guys. We have done a few now, and it's such a great program. And the fact that everybody here is already part of this program shows that you guys are taking the right steps to make sure that you're maximizing the potential for your application. So today we're going to cover everything that comes with the application. We're going to mostly focus on how the Common App does a lot of this stuff, but we'll also go into some of the UC apps so you get an idea of that. But we're really going to try and cover everything so that you guys have an idea from A to Z what you can do with your applications. My name is Matt McKee. I'll introduce myself more in depth later. I'm a college admissions specialist and founder of MRM Education. But before we get all into that, Luma, if you would go to the next slide. I wanted to share a couple of resources with you all. So these are just a pair of resources, and I'm actually going to start at the bottom here. So this AXS Companion is an important tool for the Common App. The Common App is notoriously confusing. People never know what goes where. They're confused by how to upload letters of recommendation. You're wondering what is an extracurricular and what is an award? What should I put here? What do I do about word count? All of these things. So the AXX Companion is a tool that was put together by a group of independent consultants like myself and university administrators to help you guys with the Common App. I highly recommend scanning that QR code and going to that tool because it will answer your questions. It is completely free. They are not trying to sell you anything, and it will save you a whole lot of headaches as you move through this process. The other one is just an office hours style admission support that we do, which is a way of giving back to the community. It is totally free. Every Friday starting in August, I go on to a Zoom link for an hour and I just work with students who are looking for help with anything. A lot of them have questions with strategy. Others have questions about their essay or extracurriculars or building their school list. Some aren't even starting the application process yet, and they're just wondering about what classes to select. But it is a very really easy way to work with an admission specialist. Again, it is totally free. We're not trying to sell you anything. We're just trying to make sure that college admission support is accessible to everyone and that you're able to get that support. So you'll see those QR codes there. They are also on the next page in case you don't have an opportunity to scan them. And let's move on to the next slide. So to cover kind of everything that we're going to go over today, we're going to start with rethinking college applications. I think there's a very basic way that people think of college applications. It's a very limited way of thinking of college applications. And before we can really help you move in a more thorough direction, we need to kind of redefine what is a college application and how to think about that. Once we're able to do that, then we're going to get into crafting your application theme. And I saw that a lot of you on this call are juniors and seniors. And for those of you who are rising into grade 12 or you're rising seniors, really thinking about what this application theme is going to be your chief concern. You're going to have to kind of dig back into the past, 8 years or so of your schooling, and you're going to have to figure out, hey, what are the recurring patterns? What are the things that have been important to me? And how can I take these things and present a coherent story that are ultimately going to result in my application theme? We're going to cover a little bit about what top colleges are looking for. There are specific traits that aren't so obvious outside of good grades and good test scores that you need to highlight for you to be as attractive as possible to some of these top schools. We're going to get into some of that. And then as far as the hard facts of the essay go, we're going to break down how to do personal statements. We're going to break down supplemental essays, extracurriculars, and best practices regarding getting letters of recommendation, how to get them, who to get them from, and the best ways to get those. So we will give you a few more seconds to scan these QR codes, and then they're going away until the end of the presentation. So let's move on to the next slide and we'll dive right in. So who am I? My name is Matt McKee. I am the founder of MRM Education, an elite college admissions consultancy and tutoring company. I've been working as an admissions specialist for over a decade. At this point, it's actually closer to 15 years, but I don't want to date myself. So we at MRM Education, we work with students of all backgrounds, including high achievers, homeschool students, neurodivergent students, students in entertainment, and most recently, student athletes. I am also an application reader for the UC system, which do not be confused. I am not an admissions officer for the UC system. I instead read preliminary applications and I make recommendations that help admissions officers make their decisions. So I spend a lot of time reading applications, not only with students that I work with, but students that are applying to the UC system. At MRM, we have collectively helped over 100 students gain admission into top universities. But really, our mission is to support students not just academically, but we want to support their long-term success through mental health and social confidence. That being said, what our goal is that, college admissions is a very opaque process. It's a very confusing process. There is a lot of anxiety around it. And if you do it incorrectly, it can wind up being very stressful, and working with the wrong person can create more stress. Our philosophy as an organization is not to create some more stress. We're not here to say you need to do, you need to create a nonprofit and solve world hunger and be the captain of the soccer team. We really like to focus in on what it is that you are passionate about, what it is that you love. What are the things that really set your hair on fire? Because those are the things that we can then work with, so that we're digging deeper on those things to maximize your potential, to get you to dig into the things that you want to do, as opposed to just doing the things that you think an admissions officer wants to read. And that's really how we work with students to maximize their potential and protect their mental health. So let's move on to the next slide, and we can talk a little bit about what are the characteristics that colleges really want. So number one, leaders and innovators. When you really think about what colleges are doing to make sure that their reputation is where they want it to be, where does Harvard get their reputation? Is it because they have a great education? Yes, but it really goes beyond that. Their reputation mostly comes from their graduates, right? These schools want to be able to say, we graduated CEOs from Fortune 500 companies. We graduated cutting edge researchers for scientific research. They want to be able to say that they had senators and presidents and diplomats, right? So they want students who they're picking out who they believe can meet those standards, and who they look at and they go, when they come here, we will be able to get them to the place where they can become that thought leader, where they can become that world leader, or that industry leader. So you really want to make sure that you're focusing on your leadership and your ability to innovate. They want students with initiative and passion. There is a tendency for students, especially high school students, right, to just kind of do the next thing that is in line. First, I took chemistry, and then I took biology, and then I took physics, and maybe my senior year, I took AP physics. But what these schools really want to be able to see is a student who falls in love with an idea, a student who falls in love with an area of study, a student who falls in love with an industry or a concept. And then they really, beyond falling in love with it, they have the opportunity, they have the desire, and they have the drive to take that thing deeper. They want to see what that student will do with it. And they want to see a little bit that you act like a dog with a bone, that you pull that string and you see where it goes. So it's not just about finding that passion, but then about finding that drive, and finding opportunities that exist outside of your typical school opportunities that you can really showcase and say, I'm a self-starter. I have initiative. Next, we're talking about unique experiences and unique perspectives. So I think it's no secret, right? DEI is not a trendy topic right now. The Trump administration is antagonistic to all of DEI, whether or not, staying out of politics there, it is sort of just a fact. A couple of years ago, we had the Supreme Court decision regarding affirmative action, and now schools are in a place where they're going, we don't really know what we can and can't do regarding diversity. That doesn't mean that they no longer want diversity on their campus. It just means that they have to seek it out in a different way. And that's where perspective and experience comes in. When they're admitting students, they're not just admitting a singular student, they're admitting an entire freshman class, and they want that freshman class to be a breadth of students, right? There is a spectrum of students. They don't want a monolithic body of students. They want students who have competing viewpoints, competing ideas, competing concepts, all of this. So you need to, through your essay, through your theme, through everything that you're able to express on your application, showcase your unique perspective and experiences. Have you traveled to Africa and spent time out on safari? Have you taken other interesting trips? Have you started interesting projects? Have you had some adversity happen to you that makes you think about the world in a way that a lot of people don't think about? That's some of the stuff you want to highlight because they want that unique perspective and they want that unique experience. They want strategic students. You'll often hear about spiky students or narrow students. I sort of reject those terms because I don't know that you need to put everything all in a singular lane or spike, but they want students who have an idea of where they're going. They want students who are planning. They want students who they can see what the trajectory of their path in life is. You don't just want to go in and say, well, I'm doing a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and I don't really know where I want to go. They want students who have an idea of where they're going. It comes back to initiative. They really just want to be able to see, okay, this student is thinking, we know how to classify them, and we kind of know what to expect when we combine who they've been in the past with the resources that we as a university have to offer them. And that's going to be a big part of what you seniors need to worry about is what is your strategy? Lastly, it's a vision of the future. This comes back to some of the other ones of initiative and being a leader, right? But where do you want to be? What do you intend to be? What sort of problems do you want to solve? What industries do you want to get in? These schools don't just want to be admitting students who are coming in and saying, well, I wanted to go to this school because my brother went there, or my dad went there, or I don't know, I sort of liked the campus. They want students who they know are coming here and saying, I want to go to this school because of A, B, and C reasons. And ultimately, that will allow me to do the next thing that I want to do in my life. You need to have an eye toward the future. So let's move on. So like I said before, we really need to kind of rethink applications. So it's important to understand like what applications are not. It's very common. We think test scores, we think GPA, we think personal statement. That's our opportunity to highlight all of our achievements and all of the wonderful things we've done. Wrong. I'm not trying to say that test scores and GPA aren't wildly important. I'm not trying to suggest that your personal statement is not an integral part of your application, but it is far from the entirety of the application. What your application really is a highly thematic story about who you are, who you want to be, coming back to that vision of the future, and why exactly a specific college is the best place for you to become that person. I want you to rethink college applications in terms of a story, in terms of a narrative, in terms of you telling a college, this is the next chapter in my story, and you are the right vehicle to make sure that the chapters after this fulfill a certain dream. They fulfill a certain idea. Because if colleges can see that, then they'll go, I see. This is our next CEO. This is our next senator. This is our next world leader, our next innovator. And that's what they need to see. And if you don't have this theme, if you don't have this recurring idea of this is who I am, this is who I'm going to be, that's when you wind up falling back into the pack. That's where you wind up falling to the level of your grades and your test scores. And if you're applying to high level schools like the Ivies or the Ivy Pluses, or even some of the top UC schools, admissions becomes much more difficult. And let's take the next slide. So We have an application theme. We need an application theme. How do we develop this? Well, every story has a theme. The real idea is, what is yours? So for those of you who are juniors, or if there were any underclassmen on this call, you still have a little bit of time to build your theme. You can say, hey, this is what I want to do, or these are the schools I want to go into, and this is what I want to major in. And you can start to do extracurricular activities. You can do other programs. You can focus your research at a place like Lumiere on whatever that major is, or toward an understanding of whatever that passion is, or whatever that dream is. But if you're a senior, you have a little bit less time, and you really kind of need to go back and say, okay, these are the problems that I want to solve later in my life. These are the things that I want to major in. How do my actions in the past really fit in with those things? And what I would really suggest for all of you to start, whether you're a junior, senior, underclassman, middle schooler, is to focus on what you already enjoy and what you're passionate about. The first reason I suggest this, going back to the organizational philosophy that MRM has, is this will protect your mental health. I cannot stress enough that you should not get into something simply because you think it's what admissions officers want, or you think that it's going to look good on a college application. Do what you love. Focus on the things that you enjoy. And that may sound like hippy dippy advice of, you work on what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. But really, it is about, you will be more successful in that field. You will find it more enjoyable to go deep. You will find it more enjoyable to get lost in that thing. And you will then be able to take that further, which is really what colleges want to see. So when you're thinking about this theme and you're thinking about your major, they should ideally relate to each other. They don't need to be the exact same thing. You don't need to be majoring in chemical engineering and say, well, my theme is now chemical engineering, but you want them to be related. If you're telling me that you really love philosophy and you love political theory and you are thinking about changing the world's social norms, and then you tell me that you want to major in biology, I'm gonna go, I don't think this kid has really thought out their strategy. I don't know that they have the maturity to really put this together. I don't know that they're focused. And when they get to my school, are they going to be scattered? Or are they actually going to follow through with one of these? Does that necessarily preclude you from admission? No, but it is not going to help you. So then, some of the younger kids will have more opportunity to do this, but you want to emphasize the opportunities in that field. So once you've chosen your theme and you're saying, hey, I want to do, environmental science, and maybe that means my theme is related to environmental justice. Now, what are the opportunities that you're going to seek? Are you going to join or start an environmental club at your school? Are you going to get involved with a nonprofit that focuses on identifying at-risk countries and figuring out how to move those populations to safer places? You want to make sure that your activities are related to the field that you're going into, that they're related to the theme that you're creating. And then once we have that, we're going to think about our entire application through that lens. Personal statement, extracurriculars, supplemental essays, even our letters of recommendation are all going to go through this lens of, this is my theme. So the way I really like to boil this down to be most simple is the idea of studying X to become Y to solve Z. So let's move to the next slide, and I'll show you some examples of some students we've worked with, and we can get an idea of what this looks like in real time. So student A is studying STEM because he wants to become a programmer and an entrepreneur so that he can solve the ethical AI crisis. So this student was a high school student from New Jersey, ultimately wound up getting into MIT, but his theme was solving the ethical AI crisis, right? And what he did, how he supported this theme, was he developed a very primitive AI system that he then implemented at his local library, which allowed for students who were studying a specific project to check out certain books from that library, and then his program would recommend to them 2 or 3 other books that they might find helpful during their project, right? So it seems a little bit passé given how far ethical or given how far AI has come at this point. But at the time, it was very cutting edge, and he was able to put this on his application and show this is how I want to get into this thing. This is how I am passionate about this idea. This is how I've taken it further. In the second example, we have a student who wanted to study land management so that he could become a sustainable farmer with the opportunity to solve climate change. Now, the really good example about this one is that the problem we're solving is not always a problem that you yourself are going to solve individually, right? No one person is going to solve climate change. Instead, this student told a very specific story about how he would contribute to the solutions which would negate the climate crisis. And his big solution was, I want to make sure that farmers are able to profit, and I want to make sure that farmers are sustainable. So he wanted to solve these two things. And this again goes back to passion, because this student was a student that loved growing up in a rural area. He spent time always out in the woods. He would spend times camping in national parks. And what his activities looked like were often things like cleaning up the rivers in Sonoma County. So he would be out there cleaning up the trash and testing the levels of those rivers. He would be interacting with the species in those rivers to make sure that they were healthy. He was partnering with local biologists to again test and verify the health of the species in those rivers. And he was able to use all of this as evidence to then say, this is something that I'm passionate about. This is something that I can use your school to get better in, so that ultimately I can become a thought leader on how to solve the climate crisis. That student wound up at Berkeley. So finally, we have another student. She wanted to study history and film so that she could become a writer and producer. And what she wanted to solve was entertainment as education. Now, to break that down, because that doesn't feel so much like a problem to be solved, this student really found that when she was in school, she was mostly bored, but that she came to life when a teacher would throw on a movie or a film of some sort that she also found entertaining. And she found that she was absorbing that information much better, and she was just much more engaged. So her goal was to become a filmmaker, writer, producer, to be able to create entertainment that was also educational, because she felt she could speak to people, that she could improve the quality of education by making it entertaining. And that's what she wanted to solve. And so that student wound up at USC, majoring in their film, and she is in their film and TV program. But again, through each one of these, we can see a very specific theme. We have an idea of, okay, this is what this student wants to do at our university. They have a clear picture of how they're going to be in society to then work on a very specific problem, or work toward the solution for a much larger problem. So let's go to the next slide. And now that we have our theme, we can really start to put this into all the different facets of the application. So the biggest one, the one that gets talked about the most, obviously, the personal statement, right? The college essay. And if you're on the Common App, there's going to be a larger Common App essay. Some schools may require their own. We'll talk about the prompts in a second. But generally speaking, the personal statement is going to be relatively uniform throughout the different schools in the country, whether or not the school does it through the Common App, through the UC app, or through their own platform. When it comes to the personal statement, the best thing you can do for yourself is focus on good writing. And I know that that probably sounds patronizing, and it probably you kind of roll your eyes and you say, yes, I already know that. But you would be surprised, as somebody who reads hundreds of these essays during application seasons, how often we find spelling errors, grammatical errors, basic punctuation errors, and those things take you out immediately. And while I won't necessarily sit here and say, well, I don't think this student is worth passing on to the next round, I know for a fact that it is a major pet peeve of admissions officers. And if you are on the fence, and I say, you know, maybe this student could get there, right? They're right on the edge. Maybe I should pass this one along. Maybe I shouldn't. If I see spelling errors, if I see grammatical errors, it's going to hamper your opportunity. It's going to hamper your chances. Make sure your writing is clear and make sure you have a logical structure. We'll get more into that later. And make sure you have a strong through line. Again, you're telling a story. This is not a basic like argumentative essay. This is a personal statement, very much in the way that you'll see a theme exist throughout a book or a movie or any sort of story. Make sure that your personal statement has that same sort of through line. So be genuine. I can't tell you how easy it is for people who read hundreds of these essays that we can tell when you're trying to seem important or when you're trying to seem impressive or you're trying to seem cool. We know it comes through in your writing, and you can tell immediately when someone is being genuine or when somebody is really just trying to tell you about all of their accomplishments and all of the wonderful things that you've done. I don't tell students to be your personal essay. It's okay to brag. Now is not a time to be shy, but be careful with it. Be genuine. Be who you are. Don't try and be something that you think admissions officers want to see. Another big thing that we see is somebody who writes an essay about someone else. Writing an essay about your grandfather or your mom or, your neighbor who inspired you. This essay needs to be about you. So if you're going to write about somebody else, and it is possible to include somebody else in your essay, they get 10% of your essay by word count. This essay needs to be about you. You can introduce this person. You can set them up as, this is how they inspired me. You can give me a little bit of a backstory. But if I read half of your essay and it's about somebody else, I'm wondering if you understood the assignment. You need to make this essay about you and be careful whenever you write about someone else. Skew positive, use humor. There are people reading these things. I know you think that admissions officers are like these, robotic gatekeepers, but they're not. We love humor. It is so refreshing. Again, speaking about education as entertainment, it's great when you entertain us with your personal statements. We'd love to laugh. It adds to us. If a student has me laughing, I automatically go, I kind of like this kid and I want to advocate for them. And admissions officers feel the same way. And if you can get your admissions officer to advocate for you when they take you to committee, you have done half the battle. I would say maybe you've done 75% of the work. And skew positive. There are times when a sad essay does well, but it's much more difficult to make a good sad essay than it is to make a good positive essay. We are naturally predisposed as animals to enjoy the positive. We want to look at the positive things in life, and so we gravitate towards people who are positive. We gravitate towards smiles, and so I would recommend that if you feel like you have a great story and you're like, I need to talk about this sad thing that happened. I'm not going to say you shouldn't do that, but understand you do have a little bit bigger of a task before you. Coming back to what we said about the unique perspective and experience, you want to highlight those things. You want to highlight your growth, your maturity, your intellectual curiosity. Highlight your visions of the future. Drop these things into your essay because these are characteristics that colleges want to see. Again, you need to be creative about how you do it. You can't just come out and say, I think I'm more mature than everybody. But if you share a story and talk to us about, an example that shows how mature you are, I read that and I go, this is impressive. One of the things that I think is really impressive about a good essay is the way it doesn't try to do anything. Some of the most successful essays I've ever read were, one about a kid trying to achieve the perfect char on his broccoli. Another student wrote about how important it was for him to write in pen, and it was all in a metaphor about how he was making his mark. Another student began her essay with, the first time I ever went bankrupt, I was 16 years old, and she had me laughing right off the bat. So, get creative with these things. And make sure you're alluding to why, right? This comes back to your theme. Make sure you're alluding to telling me, what is it that you plan to do? Where are you going with all of this? You're going to write this great essay, and at the end, I'm going to ask you, so what? You need to answer that question. So I generally coach students to say, hey, the last paragraph of this essay, if it doesn't answer so what, it's going to be a little bit problematic, right? You need to tell me where you're going because I want to see where you're going. I want to know what you have planned for the future. And so you got to allude to why is all of this stuff important. Avoid overused topics and gimmicky structures. Uh, I don't want to hate on sports. I love my student athletes. I was a big athlete myself, but we don't care. You know, there's so many kids who write about the big sports injury. Um, we don't want your poetry. We don't want a hyper unique structure that's a little bit unclear. Keep it into, you know, your kind of typical writing. Obviously you're telling me a story here, but you don't need to change the structure. This is basic prose. There should be a narrative. You should not be getting into some sort of avant-garde, very sort of new age thing. Keep it simple. Other overused topics, yes, I would stay away from sports. I would stay away from the big moment. I would stay away from, you know, your experience on the debate team or at the Olympiad, anything like that. And then, you know, lastly, this is not a highlight reel. I cannot tell you, this is probably the number one mistake I see. It is not an excuse for you to put your resume in prose form. I do not care about the things you have done. I have already read your activities list. I've read your honors and awards. You have a limited amount of communication that you can have with the admissions officer. Don't repeat yourself. Your essay is, again, it's a through line, it's a narrative, it's letting you as a person, your proclivities, your foibles, your humor, your experiences, it's letting all of that jump off the page. If you just then regurgitate to me in prose form all of your achievements, you're wasting that space. Do not do that. Let's go to the next slide, and we are going to talk a little bit about the prompts that are on the Common App. And the Common App is 2 weeks away, I believe, from coming out. So these prompts are going to be a little bit different. Luma, can we go to the next slide? So the Common App is 2 weeks away. So these prompts are going to be a little bit different. These are the ones from last year. But what I can tell you is that the prompts change very, very minimally. They may add a prompt, they may change one a little bit, but these are basically going to be the rundown of what they are. A background, identity, interest, or talent that is so meaningful they believe their application would be incomplete without it. A time you faced a challenge, a setback, or a failure. A time when you questioned or challenged a belief or idea. A time when you felt grateful and how it affected you. An event, a realization that sparked a period of your personal growth. Describe something you find so engaging that it makes you lose track of time. This is a great way to think about what is your passion? What do you love to do? This is what they're asking you here. They're telling you, hey, tell us about what makes you tick. Because if it really makes you tick, you're the only one in the world, or you're one of a very small handful that does it. And that right there is your key to standing out. Number 7, share an essay on a topic of your choice. So there's a whole lot that we can understand from that last essay, that last prompt, which is these schools don't care what you are telling them. They just want to get an idea of who you are. They want to get an idea of what makes you unique. They want to get an idea of what makes you tick, whether it's a talent, whether it's a pivotal moment from a challenge or setback, whether it's a concept that you love and have to dive into, whether it's something that happened to you that has made you the person you are today. It doesn't matter. And you can take any one of these questions and bend them to your will. Never do we ever kind of look at these and go, well, he didn't follow the prompt. We never say that. We always judge based on the writing, the quality of the writing, the content of the writing, and what we are able to glean about the person who wrote it. If there's anything that I can tell you to understand about these prompts, it is that. Write what you know you're going to succeed at. Um, take a photo of these prompts, copy and paste them, do whatever you have to do, because like I said, even though there might be slight changes to them, most of this stuff is going to be exactly the same when the Common App opens up in 2 weeks. And for those of you, the juniors and sophomores who are on this call, these are going to be roughly the same or in 2 or 3 years. So you should start brainstorming, start journaling on these ideas, start journaling on these topics, mining yourself for what you love, mining yourself for what's interesting, and thinking about it in terms of these questions. So let's move on to the next slide, and we will get into the supplemental essays. So for those of you who don't know, I'm sure you have a pretty good idea. The supplemental essays are generally the shorter essays that these schools are going to hit you with, that are more focused on the school themselves. The personal statement is general. It's about you. It doesn't really matter what school it is. The supplemental essays, much to the contrary of that, are going to be very school-based. So the key here is to get as specific as possible. Nothing is less interesting than an essay that says, I want to go to Harvard because they have a really good education, or because I really liked the campus. You need to get specific. They already know these things about themselves. You should not spend these essays talking about how good the school is or telling them things they likely already know. Instead, you need to do things like do your research. Talk about the clubs that you want to join. Talk about the professors that you want to study with. Talk about the courses of those professors that you want to study with. Get on the internet, Google, this is the professor, or get onto their website and find this is the courses that this professor teaches. Find the most interesting course. Find one that relates to your theme and say, oh, I really want to take this course because it fits in with my theme. And I love what this professor has been doing in the outside world. I love what their research says. And I can't wait to take that research and apply my thoughts to that research in this class. Look at the programs, look at the values of the school. Know these things and figure out the best way for you to identify with those things, for the best way for you to say to this school, hey, I see you. I see what you stand for. I see what you have to offer. And this is exactly how I plan on using those things to become the person I want to become and solve the problems I want to solve, right? Comes back to theme. Some of the most effective strategies with the supplemental essays, and seniors, you can do this, juniors, you'll have a little bit more time, is, start emailing the club's presidents. Talk to them. Figure out like, hey, what does a typical meeting look like, right? They'll give you answers to these questions, and you'll be able to then call out specific things to an admissions officer, and they'll go, oh, they actually spoke to somebody. They want kids who want to come there, right? They don't want kids who are just kind of going like, whatever, seems good. No, they want kids that have done the research. It'll be a little bit harder, but email these professors. Say, hey, I really loved your course on industrial engineering, or I love the title of that course. Can you tell me a bit more about what the assignments look like in that course? Calling out an assignment in a supplemental essay to an admissions officer, that might actually move the needle. The other thing to remember is that admissions officers know the professors. They work at the same school. And for those of you who are, maybe sports oriented, understand that an admissions officer is a little bit like a talent scout for a professor. Now, I'm not saying that your admissions officer and the professor that you're calling out will know each other, but if it does happen and you've called out a specific assignment in Professor Smith's class and your admissions officer knows Professor Smith, he may go to a Professor Smith and go, hey, this kid wrote about this. Like, what do you think about that? Professor Smith might put in a good word for you now, right? So this is the level of specificity that you really need to get to move the needle. Get involved, do your research, go beyond what is the typical student, or go beyond what the typical student is going to do. Um, don't write modular essays. Every student since the beginning of time kind of goes and they look at like all these schools and they go, well, we can write the essay about summer camp, and we can use that here, and then maybe we can also use that over here, and then for this other one I can use this essay about my experience on the soccer team. Don't do that. There will be essays that you reuse. There will be ideas that come back, and stories that you will say again and again. You'll talk about the business you started in more than one school. But don't write modular essays and then repurpose them. write the essay in the best way for it to be answered for each school. If you try and deconstruct an essay that you've already written, if you try and Frankenstein it, it just starts to look weird. It starts to look forced. And when you read a lot of these essays, you can see, oh, this didn't quite fit. The student was trying to sort of shoehorn this experience so that they would be able to kind of really use it again. You don't want to do this. Much more in the same that we were talking about before. Highlight leadership, highlight growth, work ethic, maturity, intellectual curiosity, and an eye toward the future. Again, these are the characteristics you want to highlight. You want to talk about the way that you have done these things in the scope of your theme. And that comes back to don't forget about your theme, right? If again, you're applying to culinary school and you're talking about how you want to join the chemistry club. Well, actually, maybe those two things make sense if you're talking about food chemistry. But, if you're talking about being an English major and then you're telling me that you want to join the biology club, I'm going a little bit like, those two things don't really work together. And then the last note, which is a logistical note, select your major in the application early. And that is like a physical thing. Go into the Common App and select in the box major, right? It'll be a drop down and you'll go, I want to major in physics. And you're going to click it. The reason I say this is because if you do everything in a Google document or a Word document and then plan to import it later, there is a good chance that when you click on that major, your school is now going to send you new supplemental essays. They're the ones that are for the specific schools. If you do that early, you find out what those are right away. If you wait to do it, now at the last minute, you're having to answer like three more questions. Sometimes they have an entire full 800-word essay that you have to do. First thing you should do, go into your major, or sorry, go into your school, select the major, and see what questions pop up. And if you're not sure which major, maybe you're like, maybe physics, maybe chemistry. Go in and see what both have to offer because that is a very common problem, and you want to get ahead of that. It's a very solvable thing and a easy problem to get to fix. Common prompts that you'll see, some version of why us, what do you intend to major in and why, elaborate on an extracurricular you've done and why it's important to you, our values, our X, Y, and Z, how will you contribute to those values on campus, describe a unique perspective or value that you have that sets you apart. And go on, you can look at these things. I know University of Michigan released theirs a couple days ago. Notre Dame released theirs today. One of their questions was, how does faith drive your life? Right? So you got to start to think about what the values of the schools are and how you're going to answer those questions. Juniors, if you're thinking about applying to any specific schools, now would be a good time to look at their supplementals this year because they'll be very similar, if not the same, next year. Luma, can you take us to the next slide, please? Great. So let's talk about the extracurriculars. The real key here is depth, not breadth. If you're a freshman and you want to try out a whole bunch of things, that's great. I'm okay with that. Ultimately, though, as we move forward, we want to get deep. I don't want you to be on the soccer team and the baseball team and the basketball team and the football team and the lacrosse team. I want you to be the captain of the soccer team. And I want you to be, running the fundraisers for the soccer team. It's about getting deeply involved in your extracurricular. It's not getting involved in a lot of extracurriculars. This, again, comes back to the idea of getting involved in the things that you love. I don't want you wasting time, starting a business on something that you think is going to be impressive. Instead, I want you to focus that time and energy into something you really, really enjoy. A great example of this is a student that I worked with who was really, really into fashion, but she wanted to go to business school. So she thought she had to do something really impressive with business. Instead, she started a fashion YouTube channel, grew it over 3 years to over 50,000 followers, talked about it in her essay. It was really impressive because it was something she did over 3 years. And if we move to the next dot there, you can see focus on leadership, innovation, and impact. In that example, she was able to show, I grew this channel. We had this many impressions. We had this many followers. We had this many likes. And she ran it, right? She had a team of people who helped her run it. She started it on her own. So when you're getting into these extracurriculars and these things that you're doing outside of school, how are you driving it forward? How are you measuring your impact? And coming back to that idea of leaders and innovators, what are you doing to help it grow? If you're involved in a nonprofit and you're not necessarily the leader there, are you still giving input into how that nonprofit can grow? Are you offering insight and thought? Is there something that you suggested that they actually took on? Because you should write about that. And this comes to showcase your measurables. Really know what was your impact. If you started a nonprofit that was, feeding people, I want to know how many people you fed. If you're talking about taking carbon out of the air, I want to know how much carbon you took out of the air. How many students did you get free tutoring for? These are the questions. You want to make sure you're measuring your impact because anybody can do something. Anybody can start a website. Not everyone can start a website that then, offered certain services or partnered with certain businesses, which then had a specific impact and supported kids in an underprivileged community. Know your impact. And again, related to your major and your theme. Right? It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to be exact. But if your major is climate science and your theme is, the climate crisis, you should be involved in something that is going to be related to climate change. Length and consistency. I want to see that you've done this for 4 years. Even if you haven't done that specific extracurricular for 4 years, I want to see that you're diving deep in that general field, right? You're in the climate space. You're doing other things that are related to climate science. You're out there cleaning up the rivers. You're starting the environmental club. That's what we're talking about when we're talking about length and consistency. You don't want to be jumping around from, hey, I did this for a little bit and I did that for a little bit and so on and so forth. Freshman year, cast your net wide. Then sophomore year, start to cull and start to do it ruthlessly. Get rid of the things that don't bring you joy. Get rid of the things that you're not having fun, and get rid of the things that don't really relate to who you think you want to be in the future. And then look for outside of school related activities. What I mean by this is anybody can join the sports team. Anybody can join the chess club or the mathletes or whatnot. What can you do that your school isn't putting directly in front of your face? What are the things that you can do that show me as a reader or show an admissions officer, oh, this kid probably had to go do that. He had to have the initiative to do this and talk to that person, right? Or does that mean you're shadowing a doctor if you're interested in medicine? Does that mean you're getting involved with an NGO if you're interested in some sort of social justice? But finding things that aren't directly related to your school, jump out a little bit more because we go, oh, there's initiative there. There was passion there. There was drive there. And again, characteristics, those are the ones that are really important. Lastly, short and sweet descriptions. This doesn't need to be a resume that you beef up. Again, tell me your impact. Tell me what your leadership role was. Give me a basic idea of what you were doing. I don't need more things to read. I need more succinct things to read, right? This comes back to Mark Twain. I would have written you a shorter letter, but I didn't have time. Take the time to make your description short and tell me what you were doing. Tell me what matters. Little tip, activities should be written in order of importance and prestige, not in chronological order. I can't tell you the amount of times I see something at the top that is totally unrelated, and a student is telling me, well, it's the most recent thing that I did. This is not a resume. It is your list of activities. Put the most impressive and the most prestigious things on top. I don't care if they happened when you were a freshman. If you feel like there are two things that are the same in prestige and importance, then tell me the one that you did more recently first, because things that you do as a junior or senior are more important than things that you did as a sophomore or freshman. So now let's get into the last bit here of letters of recommendation. So when it comes to the Common App, you're always going to need 1 to 2 teachers, or you're not always, but commonly, you're going to need 1 to 2 teachers. You're going to need a counselor. Those are probably going to be requirements. You can't get around that. You're also, other people who can write them for you if they accept additional ones, coaches, mentors, employers, peers, really anyone who will boost the application. When we're talking about the what, we really want to make sure that this is somebody with whom we have a strong relationship. This is really the key thing here. I'm going to discuss a couple of other things here, but this is the key thing, because going back to authenticity, you want a recommendation that rings true. A recommendation from your English teacher that rings true and speaks to who you are as a person is worth more than a recommendation from the President of the United States that says, Kyle is a great kid and he will be wonderful at your university, right? You want, going into the next thing, high profile and influential people, but if those people are not going to be able to give you a personal, thorough, and authentic letter of recommendation, favor the stronger relationship over the higher profile, influential person. Personal connection is another really good bit here. You want somebody who can speak to who you are as a person. You don't just want them to be able to say, hey, they did a really good job in my class, or they seem like a really good student. You want to get into this kid lights up in the classroom. One letter of recommendation that I read was from a science teacher, and it was related to a student who the teacher had made the mistake of allowing the students to pick their own groups. And there was one kid who was, not so cool. And the teacher knew immediately as he saw the groups forming that this kid was going to get left out on their own and it was going to be a very uncomfortable situation. And the student who was asking for the recommendation was the student who went over to the unpopular kid and sat next to them. And he was able to speak to this girl's character through that story. It doesn't matter how influential or high profile you are. If somebody can speak to that level of who you are, that's the type of thing that admissions officers want to read. That's the type of thing that I go, oh, this kid has character. And when I put that in the context of your theme and all the other bits of your application, it really starts to speak to who you are. So the most important bit of this is the how. Start now. Seniors, if you've waited, do it the first day you get back to school. Juniors, you need to start building those relationships, right? If there's certain teachers that are that you think are standing out to you as possibilities, build that relationship. Go see them after class. Have a conversation about the content that you really liked. Go make sure, see if you can get extra opinions on a project, or go in for an extra study session if they are available to that. Build a genuine relationship with them now, because the more they have in that, the better that letter of recommendation will really be for you. This is a note for juniors and seniors, but seniors, make sure you know this going in now. Be upfront about your expectations, right? You want to be genuine, you want to be authentic. Let people know when you're going in. You're like, hey, I would like you to write this letter of recommendation from me. Here are the things that I think would go in it. If they are the type of person who wants a brag sheet or a cheat sheet, really what I recommend in those situations is writing something to the effect of, hi, history teacher, I would love a letter of recommendation from you. And some moments that really stood out to me in your class are, and you're going to highlight the moments that you felt you were really showcasing who you were. The moments that you felt like you were really engaged. And so you're talking both about like how much you love their class, and you're talking about how successful you felt you were. And that gives them something to write about. It gives them an idea. It gives them somewhere to start. Because remember, they have a lot of students that are going to be coming up to them and asking them for letters of recommendation. So the keys here, influential is great, but it doesn't matter if they don't know you. Make sure you have a strong relationship with them and start building that relationship now, because you really want the letter of recommendation to be a very personal thing, not just a reiteration of how good of a student you are. And remember, UC does not read letters of recommendation, but they may request one after an initial application review. So to put that in the context of how it happens behind the scenes, I will never be reading your UC application with a letter of recommendation, but your admissions officer may see what I've written and say, hey, we would really like to see a letter of recommendation. Or your admissions officer may pass you on to the next round, which is going to be a committee of admissions officers. And at that point, you may be 50-50, and they will ask for a letter of recommendation. So you should be ready with one and understand that. One more note on this. Obviously, I said this should be in theme. But again, if you're trying to go into the sciences and you're giving me something from your English teacher, not as though that's a problem, but it does look better if that's from the science teacher. If I have, or you can give me some sort of proof of concept that you're able to succeed with the adults in your life in the field that you want to go into, that looks really, really good. So you want to try and move that toward the theme of your application if you can, though that is not necessarily a hard and fast deal breaker. So I believe if we go to the next slide, that's going to take us to our Q&A. So I know I just threw a ton of information at you. And if anybody does have any questions, I will hang out as long as Sadia will let me hang out. And again, these QR codes was for our office hours style admission support, the Common App tool, which again, I cannot recommend highly enough. And yeah, thank you for coming. Thank you for listening. And Sadia, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much, Matt. This is super insightful. And every year I learn something new. Things change so quickly in the college admission space. So it's super important to have folks like you supporting students and keeping up with the novelty in this field. So I'm just going to ask folks to send over a question or two in the chat, and we'll try to go through as many as possible. I know we are at time, so if folks need to go, we totally get it, but we will stick around for about maybe 5-10 more minutes, and then we'll close the room. But for now, let's take a few questions and see how many folks have things to ask, although it was super comprehensive. But I do also recommend for folks to connect with Matt directly and take the opportunity to chat. And if you are interested, you should definitely reach out to Matt and his team directly. Let's see. Arjun asked, is there a place to access a recording later? Yes, I will email the recording as well as some additional information along with Matt and MRM's contact info, so you can reach out directly if needed. Anna is saying, thank you for the deep dive, really helpful. Thank you, Anna.
I think I covered everything. It was that good.
It's always great when there are no questions, but I do know that folks sometimes need a second to sit with their thoughts and kind of digest information. So if you need a moment, please take it and then send over a question. But also, again, reach out to Matt directly and his team. They are able to meet up if you're interested in working with them, and they can tackle more questions one-on-one. Let's see.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate it. I hope it was very helpful.
I guess one question that I always want to ask folks in your space, because I also try to keep up with what's going on with the admission space. Our students are obviously doing research or have been doing research to some capacity in our program. So what would be your take on the best way for them to highlight the work that they do with our PhD and professor mentors this summer, or if they've already finished the program? How can they best highlight their learnings and takeaways from the program they do with Lumiere?
Yeah, for sure. So again, going back into like sort of the way you would classify that in the extracurriculars, or the supplemental essay is a great place to do that. To me, when I look at Lumiere and I look at the research that's going on here, it is such a good tool for crafting your theme. So again, I know I've been harping, I don't know why climate science is on my brain today. But if you're doing something in climate science or whatever your research thing is, right? That should then be the kind of like most basic that should be the most basic description in your extracurricular, right? Researched with, and then I would encourage using the name of your mentor or the name of your student. Conducted research with this person to help brainstorm ways to sequester carbon efficiently, right? So that would be the best way to do it in your extracurricular. Then you want to take that into the supplemental essay, where you can go, hey, I take this professor and I take this course, and now if you've reached out to the professor and you got a response, maybe you can find a way to, in the supplemental essay, write about how your research is going to support your understanding in that class. And so now you've done the research, and that is sort of like the basic level of that class. And you're excited to be able to look at that class and take that class, because you'll be able to take that class to the next level. Or if you're able to call on a specific assignment, you're then going to be able to say, I want to take this research that I did with such and such from my last year at this program, and I want to apply it to this project that I know this professor does every year, and I want to take that to the next level, right? So it's finding it, there's no one answer there, but it's really just about being creative, using your theme, and figuring out where you can inject it to make it go and say, it's not braggy, but it's passion, it's interest, and it's a way that I can take it deeper.
Thank you. This is super helpful. I see a question that is kind of adjacent, but also I guess we can take it different ways. But what are some ways we can tackle a specific theme, say neuroscience, outside of school to show initiative?
Neuroscience is ever the hot topic nowadays. I wonder, and maybe this person can chat us back in a second. I wonder if your Lumiere research is related to neuroscience. So Anna, if you can, I would love that. But I'll start answering anyway. One of the key ways that you can do this is start trying to find someone you can shadow. Like if you can get into somebody who is doing research on that, if you can get into find a doctor who is a neurologist, these are really great ways to go about this. Other more simple ways might be, if you're thinking about this from a sports aspect, I know there are lots of nonprofits that are dealing with certain issues surrounding CTE, right? That's going to be related to neuroscience. And again, this is where I say it doesn't need to be an exact spike where it's like everything is exactly neuroscience and can only be related to how I want to be a doctor that, becomes the first person to map the brain. It's just got to be related to this general thing of, oh, she answered. Let's see. My Lumiere research paper did apply to neuroscience. Thanks for asking. Okay, great. So this would be one really good way to do it, right? Because Lumiere and these research programs are not just something that are naturally accessible from school. But again, going back to that idea of like what other organizations, programs, and initiatives are also related to neuroscience that you can find a way in. And I think the beautiful thing about being a high school student is that people want to help you. You're like, hi, I'm a high school student and I just am really passionate about this thing. People automatically kind of go like, oh yeah, like I'll give you a hand. So get out there, start emailing doctors and scientists that you can find. Google is your best friend in this situation, but also try and find organizations, see if you can become a volunteer, try and find an internship that is related. But again, it's about getting creative.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This is super helpful. Another question from Darina is, how would the application process work for homeschoolers who don't have access to a guidance counselor?
Really good question. So it's gonna vary from school to school. Like I said before, if you're gonna be applying to the UCs, it won't matter. Well, I guess the question is actually outside of just letters of recommendation. So the application process is going to be the same for a homeschooler. You're going to take your transcripts, you're going to give them to them. If it's an accredited homeschool, you won't have any issues. If it's not an accredited homeschool, I would start that process ASAP so you can figure out what is going to get taken and what isn't going to get taken. Certain systems like the UCs might take certain things that a private school like Vanderbilt won't take. So that's going to be one of the big things. Other than that, it should generally look the same with the exception of who you have to get your letters of recommendation from, in which case there will be certain stipulations or special dispensations that these schools will allow for you to get other letters of recommendation, because you're not going to want one coming from your mom if she's your teacher or however that works. So yeah, it winds up being kind of a specific thing. If you have more questions, though, yeah, let's meet, let's talk about your situation, and I'd be happy to kind of give you an advice that would be more specific to you. Oh, now the questions are coming in. You're on mute, Sadia.
Oops, super sorry. I muted myself accidentally. I was going to say, thank you so much. This is great. And I think a question that kind of relates to that is another question around recommendation letters. Eldana is asking, how important is it who writes the letter of recommendation for you? Is there a difference between just a regular school teacher or a teacher who has a PhD, or potentially, I guess, also a mentor from Lumiere who has a PhD or is pursuing a PhD?
Yeah, so again, this comes back to whether or not the school's going to accept extra letters of recommendation. Some are pretty stringent on like, we want 2 teachers, we want 1 counselor. That's what we require, and we don't accept extras. If they do accept extras, look, is a PhD teacher better than a regular teacher? Sure, if all things are equal. But again, it really comes down to the idea of which one knows you better and which one is going to tell a better story about you. That the one about the girl who sat with the unpopular student, that I remember reading that application, and like it has stuck with me since. So if the PhD teacher isn't going to tell that story about you and you're like, well, I'm just going to them because they have like an impressive thing, like, no, go to the teacher that knows you better. The only situation where I think it's really, really helpful to have a specific letter of recommendation from a specific person is if they're an alum. Um, we hate to say it, but it can, in special instances, specifically to elite private schools, having an alum write you a letter of recommendation, again, if they know you well, can be really helpful.
Awesome. This is super helpful. A question coming from Wad, I'm just trying to go through as many questions as we can, is one about non-traditional students. What do you recommend for a student who did 2 years, 2 gap years to get recommendations from? And how do you recommend they frame their story with a non-traditional background?
Well, you can go back to your teachers. They can still write you the recommendations. Again, if you wind up applying now and you're able to, and you have, and they have that requirement, you can go and get the special dispensation. So the key for you, Muad, is going to be showing what you've done in these 2 years, right? So you took 2 years off. Why? Was it because something happened? In which case, tell me about what happened and how you grew from that. And then there's going to be key players in or related to that story, right? Those are the people who you're going to want to get recommendations from. Maybe you took a gap year because you felt like you needed to discover yourself and you needed to travel the world, or you needed to tackle some other thing that was going on in your life. So let me know what you tackled, what you did to grow in those 2 years. And then again, just like I said before, there's going to be key players in there. There's going to be other adults in that situation that are going to be able to speak, and they're going to say, Muad showed this type of character. I can recount this story when he did this. So you want to try and find out who those key people are, who are the adults that supported you and that can speak to the reality of what happened in those 2 years and why what happened in those 2 years supports the person that you are today.
Awesome. Thank you so much. A very nice comment coming from Eldana. Thank you very much for all the info. Everything was very detailed and interesting. I absolutely do not regret that I got up at 4 a.m. for this. And she also adds, do you have any advice for international students?
That's a very vague question. I regret to inform you that it is a very tenuous, difficult time for international students, and it is going to be for the next 3 years. That is just a harsh reality. What I can tell you is that what I would recommend is do not be a victim of your circumstances. Instead, focus on what you can control and focus on the opportunities in front of you. I would also make sure you're not putting all your eggs in the United States basket. I don't know where you're from, but you know there are great schools in Canada. There are great schools in the UK. But most importantly, focus on the things that we spoke about in this webinar. Find your theme, find your why. Make sure that you're turning in a solid application, because whether or not it's a good time for international students, you just need to turn in the best application that is possible for you. So again, focus on the things in here and focus on those things that you can control, because unfortunately it is just a very difficult time for international students.
Absolutely. And I think it's definitely probably what was on the student's mind, asking about what sort of some words of wisdom or advice for international students are. But I was an international student and I can't imagine how stressful it must be right now. So I wish you all the best of luck, but it is a great idea to work with someone like Matt, who is able to advise you on how to best proceed, and also keep in mind other options like the UK, Canada, and other places. Yeah, the student is saying she's from Kyrgyzstan. Awesome. Well, I think we are at time, and we have had such an awesome conversation. As always, super excited to work with you, Matt. It's always a pleasure, and learning so much from you every time we speak. I am gonna just ask you, do you have any last piece of advice or words of wisdom for our seniors applying next fall?
Start, don't wait, get on it. You know what I mean? Common App opens in 2 weeks, and nobody ever had a better application because they waited. Get on it, get started. It might seem sometimes like it's too late. It's not. You have time, get going. Focus on the things that you love. As soon as you start to think, well, do they want to hear this? Do they want to hear that? You're asking yourselves the wrong question. Focus on what you love. Focus on who you are, and the right school will find you. It is not about falling in love with a school. It's about falling in love with a major, with an interest, with a passion. And if you follow that, you will wind up at a place that is successful, whether or not it is the dream or the school that you think is your dream school.
Thank you so much. This is such valuable advice. And looking back at my years as a high school student going into college, this would have helped so much hearing. So thank you so much, Matt, and everyone else for joining us at various times, wherever you're located. I will send over an email tomorrow morning with a recording as well as additional information to reach out to Matt and his team. And I hope you all have a wonderful night or morning or evening. And we'll see you guys next time. Take care, everybody.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
everybody. Thank you, Sadia.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.